Paul said in Philippians, a book written while he was in prison of all things. He said, I know whom I've believed, and I am persuaded, I am convinced that he is able to keep that which I have committed unto him until that day. In 2 Timothy, while he was in prison, just before he was executed, knowing he was going to die, because in it before that he said, my departure is soon at hand. I know. I'm being poured out like a drink offering. I've come to the end of all things. And at the end of that book, he talks about the fact that God will deliver him. That God, everybody else abandoned him at his trial, but God was by his side, strengthening him, and will deliver him. For him in that moment, that deliverance was death. Wow. God, his abundant promises are yours to keep. And that is so important for the fourth thing of revival, the fourth characteristic we talked about last week, which is fruit that lasts. You know, it's easy to go to a real pumped up thing and get really charged and emotionally charged about God. Yeah, I'm into it. We go to the pastors' conference here on the East Coast, and there were, I think, 6 of us that went this last year. And man, you get in this giant room with 800 guys. I mean guys. Just worshiping God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. And I got to tell you, it pumps you up. There is an experience that is spiritual. There's an experience that is totally physically and emotional. That, yeah, I'm ready to go out and take on the world for God. And that's awesome. But you leave that company of 800 guys, and then you're going, yeah, look at all these other people around. And we can lose that enthusiasm. Enthusiasm can come and go. But what God builds in us through a revival of our hearts is fruit that lasts. What kind of fruit? Well, it's the fruit of the Spirit. Galatians 5 tells us that the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. Those are the things that God is building in you. Those are the things, that's the fruit that our lives are to give. That's what God is busy planting seeds and weeding and trimming in our lives in order that those things would come forth. Not you got to do this. Start loving people. Start being patient, would you? But instead, He changes us from the inside to the outside, and those things begin to come forth by His strength. Fruit that lasts. And that leads us into where we are this morning. Because the thing that happens after there's a revival and a big, strengthening of God is opposition. And we find in Hezekiah's time, in his experience, that opposition didn't come right away. And I think that's harder. You come out of a 800 guy, man, we're praising God. And you get some opposition, you go, yeah, man, this is nothing. But wait a while. Wait a couple of weeks. Wait a couple of months. Wait a couple of years. For Hezekiah, it was about 28 years later that the opposition and strong opposition came. And we find it as we pick it up in chapter 18, starting to read at verse 13. It says, in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and took them. Then Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria at Lachish, saying, I have done wrong. Turn away from me. Whatever you impose on me, I'll pay. And the king of Assyria assessed Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. And so Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found in the house of the Lord and in the treasuries of the king's house. At that time, Hezekiah stripped the gold from the doors of the temple of the Lord and from the pillars which Hezekiah, king of Judah, had overlaid, and gave it to the king of Assyria. Now, in this one little passage, we find a historical a historical event that is confirmed for us through various archaeological digs and finds. We find a lot of information about Sennacherib, king of Assyria, in some of the plates that have been found, including this campaign. It was his third campaign, the first to the west. Remember, Assyria is up basically where Syria and on to the east the countries are today. So it's to the north and east of Israel. And Sennacherib first dealt with two campaigns to his immediate south and his east. His third campaign was to the west, to take care of the Philistines who were revolting against him, to take care of Israel, who was Judea, really, which was rebelling against him, because now this was just the southern kingdom. And so he came, and unlike the other kings who came against Israel previously, he didn't come from the north and come down along the Jordan Valley and then cross over to get to Jerusalem. He went all the way to the coast, and he just ran down the coast, the Mediterranean. So he took over Philistia and all the Philistine cities that Hezekiah had established in his control, and just came down totally and came south of Jerusalem, and then headed inland, and now he's at Lachish, which is, I don't know, maybe 40, 50 miles from Jerusalem. And the accounts from when he took over these cities, from the archaeologists and the reliefs that were found in his temple, explaining what happened, it was horrible. He was taking people and hanging them on stakes so that they would remember. The leaders of the town would be hung on stakes, impaled, and left there for people to see, so that you don't want to mess with Sennacherib. Just like crazy going through, and nothing could stand in his way. So Hezekiah goes, man, I got to take care of this. And so he says, okay, I'll pay you the tribute. Because you see, he had taken over the Philistine cities, which at that time were owned by Assyria. Assyria was busy with something else, so Hezekiah took them over. Now Assyrians come back and take those cities over. Hezekiah goes, okay, I'll pay you off. He pays him off, but it's just an enticement for Sennacherib. It doesn't slow him down at all. Opposition. Now you may have noticed that it said in the 14th year of Hezekiah's reign. Hezekiah spent 14 years as a co-regent with his father. So this is actually 28 years into his being the leader of Israel when this happens. 28 years later. After all of these tremendous, tremendous revivals had started under his reign. 28 years, and he's got to face this big thing. For 28 years, he's been saying to Jerusalem, to Judea, to all of Israel, he's saying, look, the Lord is with us. Follow the Lord, and he won't take us away like the northern kingdom. You see, Hezekiah had seen the northern kingdom being taken away because of their sin. And he said, hey, don't turn back away from the Lord, and we won't end up like the others. And now here's Assyria coming marching right down, taking over all the cities, and he's headed for Jerusalem. So Hezekiah tries to pay him off. I'm not sure if that was of the Lord or not. I kind of think no, but the scripture doesn't explicitly say it was not. But whatever, it didn't work. It didn't work. And so what did Hezekiah do when he faced this incredible opposition? Well, for that, keep your finger in 2 Kings and turn 3 books to the right to 2 Chronicles. As we've been following along in 2 Kings, we know 2 Chronicles shows the same period of history. 2 Chronicles chapter 32. And listen to how Hezekiah prepared himself. Verse 1 in chapter 32. After these deeds of faithfulness, Sennacherib, that was faithfulness of Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came and entered Judah. He encamped against the fortified cities, thinking to win them over to himself. And when Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib had come, and that his purpose was to make war against Jerusalem, he consulted with his leaders and commanders to stop the water from the springs which were outside the city, and they helped him. Thus many people gathered together who stopped all the springs and the brook that ran throughout the land, saying, why should the kings of Assyria come and find much water?